something that you want, something you want to negotiate for. So be thinking about this. How is this going to work for me? How would this work in real life? And you can pose those questions at the end of the session. I'll talk until about 6, so I'll have ample time for your questions. You can also use the chat function to chat in your thoughts and comments. And if I don't see them, the team that's supporting me will help me to see your thoughts. So with that, let us get started. So why are these negotiation skills so important? And I'm right off the bat going to reframe what we mean by negotiation. There's data that tells us that merely calling something a negotiation makes women, more so than men, less willing to engage in that conversation. So the second I call something a negotiation, right away, women are more reluctant to engage in that conversation. So instead, and you'll notice how I title the session, Asking for What We Want. So why are these asking skills so important? For a lot of different reasons. I did some research before this session to try to get up-to-date numbers. And here's what I have. So in 2019, the proportion of women in senior management roles grew globally 29%. And in 2020, this percentage remains the same. So the proportion of women in leadership roles, we are gaining ground, but still it's only 29%. And we know in 2020, women lost a lot of ground in terms of leadership, seniority, etc. So the skills to ask are critically important there. Women are overrepresented in these support functions. So we've seen this for a while, and it's still the case, even in 2019. Support functions like administration, men tend to be concentrated in those roles that we look at as pipeline roles to CEO or to senior leadership positions. So women are in these roles, HR, other roles that we don't necessarily look at as pipeline roles for CEOs. So we need to ask more to be moved into those positions where we're developing and priming the pump for higher levels of leadership. And what I just mentioned, there's this leaky pipeline for women. As we go down, so senior leadership or executive roles, 23%, senior managers, 29%, down, professionals, 42%, support staff, 47%. So we're leaking out of the pipeline for senior leadership roles. There's a lot of reasons for that, but we need to learn to be more deliberate about what roles we want, and be more deliberate about carving our way upward or carving our way towards those roles, what we want. Asking again for these development opportunities, asking for these roles that will help us to be groomed for those higher leadership positions. Some other research here, some other statistics: women are more likely than men to do non-promotable tasks. So tasks that aren't beneficial to the organization, they don't result in advancement, don't result in something that we can add to our resume. So I was surprised that women are still asked to do these things like taking notes, preparing the presentation, ordering lunch, creating doing the team a celebration event afterwards. Women are still put in those roles more often than men, and they're not considered they're not helping us to, for our experience and to put on our resume as far as experiences that will help us achieve that next position. We're assigned 55% more of the work in the office, and we do 10% more work than men. Does that resonate with any of you out there? As you look around, well, now we're in the virtual office world, but as you look around your offices, do you see men volunteering for things at the same rate as women? And I by no means intend to rip on men. These are just statistics that we have. And since this is a group of women, I want to make sure that we understand this. Women tend to volunteer for these kind of administrative tasks, these tasks that are not considered developmental, at a higher rate than men. And women tend to do more when we look at productivity measures. Women tend to do more work than men. So we perhaps need to ask to do more of the meaty work, less of the admin work. Asks somebody else to do those more administrative tasks. Ask to reprioritize the things that are on our plate. By age 30, men are 8% more likely to have become managers, 22% more likely to have reached senior managers. So again, this is from an article, April 2nd, 2019, so relatively recent data. Here's another reason why negotiation skills are important. And I know you've been looking out there with the pandemic, with 2020. There have been lots and lots of challenges on schooling children from home, balancing the additional responsibilities at home and at work. So this is from 2020, a Gallup poll. The dark green, the women are more likely to do this work. The light green, the men are more likely to do this work. So making decisions about furniture, decorations, laundry, cleaning the house, preparing meals, you can see that women have the bulk of this work. And this is a huge opportunity for us to ask more, ask to balance out that work. Instead of automatically taking it upon ourselves to do that, to open the conversation, to negotiate, or ask to better balance those types of tasks at home. Surprise, surprise, we don't get any additional reward for doing it. We just get a lot less time to ourselves and a lot more headaches and stress. So thinking about what is going on in your own home environment, where are there opportunities for better balance? Where are there opportunities to maybe ask for a situation or circumstance that could afford you more time to be more deliberative about time for yourself? Pay gap, again, why are asking skills so important? We know about the pay gap. Even within a control group, so even when you're removing all other factors, you're comparing an exact apple to an exact apple, by gender alone, that's still costing us 2 cents. So even if you're comparing across all these different controls, women are still paid less than men. So obviously, in the subject of money, pay, there's opportunity to ask. I was trying to do some work or looking at some statistics specifically in your fields. Not a lot out there, but here's what I found, that women are generally paid less in both total cash and equity in tech. And it wasn't specific what kind of tech. In biotech, it looks like women are making less total cash, but they're receiving more in equity. I couldn't find any other data around that, why that is or what that could be. But there's an opportunity there as far as cash is concerned. We know this across the board, the total number of women in these positions is quite low. So we know that in general, women in tech and biotech numbers are low. Likely there's an opportunity somewhere there to ask and to negotiate. But most certainly the fourth bullet point there, female chief executives remain exceedingly rare, especially in the drug industry, accounting for less than 10% of biotech's leaders. I love this quote, a shockingly, ridiculously low number. So again, as you're looking around, I couldn't find any data about Madison, but as you're looking in your organization, where are there opportunities for you to gain a higher level of authority, of leadership? And is it going to require you to ask, to pave the way, to negotiate for a different work situation? We know, again, there's a ton of opportunity and a ton of situations where women can use these negotiation skills. So looking at what Kate said, these stats are so eye-opening. I know it's eye-opening, and it's every time I do these, it's a little somewhat depressing, although not as depressing as it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So let's make a commitment, all of us here right now today, that we are going to use these skills, these asking skills, these negotiation skills to get more of what we personally want, collectively perhaps to get more, make some more strides for women in general, women in tech, to move this situation forward so that in 5 years, or when I come back to do this presentation, we've got some stronger numbers here. So as you're thinking about this, thinking about what I just shared, maybe thinking about your situation at home, at work, trying to balance that out, what are some things that you'd like to negotiate for? And it doesn't have to be a majorly big thing, like I want to negotiate for a huge raise, although that's fine. But as you're looking at the next week, the next 2 weeks, the next month, the next 4 months, what is something that you want? What is something that you're unsettled about? Is it that you're feeling like the work is not balanced within your team? Do you feel like you're the one that's being asked to do maybe the less career enriching types of work? Is it at home that you're doing more of the chores around the house? So stick those things down in the chat function, and let's all kind of keep an eye on those. I'm going to see if there's any trends in there. So this one, huge, that continued to work at home. I'm hearing a lot of that. A lot of my clients are really appreciating some of the benefits of working from home, and it is helping them to keep a more balanced life. So that's interesting. Promotion, getting stuck with the emotional work at home. Yeah. Have any of you seen, oh drat, I should have kept the link. There's this great illustrated, I don't know if you call it a meme, on the web about women with the executive function, kind of the admin work, that they're the ones that even when we're assigning, we're balanced with our partners about chores, but we're still the ones that have to keep it all in our heads. Like the kids need their immunization, the garbage has to go out on Tuesday, that we're still doing that admin work. So that's like this emotional work, getting stuck carrying that burden, the ones who have to remember all that. Hiring additional staff, okay. Promotion, ditto on the work from home, okay. Manager of the household, yeah. My daughter sent me that meme. Maybe I'll look for it later and give you that link. Continued education, okay. These are great things. So keep in mind the thing that you want to negotiate for as I'm going through the rest of this presentation. So how, trying this on, how is that going to work? So I've already said this. So when we're looking at our definition of a negotiation, here's what we're looking at. A negotiation is a discussion. It's a dialogue. So it's a discussion, a dialogue, and it's aimed at producing a wise agreement in a way that leaves the relationship stronger. And what I mean by wise agreement, that's really important here. I'm not using the word fair, because fair is in the eye of the beholder. Fair is what I think is fair, and what another party is fair may be very different. Wise implies data, it implies criteria, it implies that we are seeking a mutually agreeable solution, and the solution we come up with is going to be based on some kind of data, some kind of criteria. So wise or smart solution, not fair, because right away fair implies two different sides, two different perspectives on what is best or what is right. And the second we start getting caught up on best or right, then we lose that mutual, that focus on mutual interests, this mutually agreeable outcome. This last little piece that leaves the relationship stronger, that's a big piece too, because we could do a lot of negotiation that damages the relationship, that abuses the relationship. That's not what I'm talking about here. So the tactics that I'm going to share with you here leave the relationship stronger. If you are in a situation where you don't really care much about the relationship, then there's other tactics you can certainly use, but they probably are not going to be what we're talking about here. Somebody mentioned that a parent-child relationship, we call that, some people look at that as a negotiation, a bedtime or something, and that's not a negotiation. That's you're in a position of authority, and you're, in that case, much wiser than the child, for example. And in that case, the relationship probably goes through some ups and some downs. So some of the tactics that I'll be sharing here may work in a situation where the power isn't balanced like that. But sometimes we call things a negotiation when they're truly not a negotiation. So negotiation, we're aiming or we're looking at a dialogue that's producing a wise agreement where the relationship is stronger and you can come back to that relationship later to get more of what you and the other party want. So I'm going to just share this quote. This happened 3 years or so ago now. I don't know if you remember Jennifer Lawrence. She got wind of what a male co-star was making in a movie I think she was shooting, and it was a lot more than what she was making. So she wrote this open letter on Lenny on this website, just about her feelings about negotiation, her feelings about being a woman in negotiation. And here's what she said. She said, if I'm honest with myself, I'd be lying if I didn't say there was some element of wanting to be liked that influenced her decision to close the deal without a fight. She didn't want to seem difficult or spoiled. And I know so many women who feel this way. We don't want to seem rude or brash or brash, difficult, spoiled. We want to come across as nice and a team player and all these things. And indeed, other people expect that of us. So indeed, we are rewarded or penalized if those behaviors don't show up. I see, sadly, a lot more when women are open, honest, frank, blunt, etc., that those same behaviors, when my male clients exhibit those, the women get negative feedback for those behaviors when the men don't. So we know that women are somewhat penalized and disincented to be more strong when they ask, which is why I'm going to share some techniques for you. Sadly, it's the way it is right now. At some point, we'll be able to behave in a way that's similar to men and not be disincented for it. And I know I'm making up that word disincented, but you know what I mean, that we're told not to do that. But we feel this way, that we're reluctant to fight. We want to still maintain this this feeling of wanting to be liked or this team player and not seem like we're being difficult or being spoiled. So to get more of what we want, we need to ask, and that's the theme of what we're talking about here. And here's what Jennifer Lawrence said. I'm over trying to find the adorable way to state my opinion and still be like, well, she says, I'm done with that. I don't think I've ever worked with a man in charge who spent time contemplating, thinking about what angle he should use to have his voice heard. So she's done with asking in an adorable way, because men don't have to do that. And something for us all to think about. So those are some of the tips, or these are some of the tips that we'll share with you now. So let's looking over here at the chat. Love the distinction between, oh, that was before. So true. Yeah. So how many of you, if we were in a room right now, I'd ask you, how many of you have felt this way before, have felt that you had to shift who you are in order to not offend the other party, to get what you want? Yeah, me. I know it. I'm a 54-year-old professional that has taught this for years, and I still find myself when I'm in a position working with clients and they question my pricing or question something, I have to really sit back and say, Allison, you've earned this. You can ask for this. You have every right to ask for this. And it still takes a little bit of, I can do it. So it takes practice. All right. Yeah, am I being too direct? I forgot to ask you, I included, or when they sent the invite, there was a couple, like a study guide, participant pages, and you can follow along with that with me here. On page 1 of those participant pages, I've listed the elements of a negotiation. I'm not going to go through these elements here one by one, but they're peppered throughout this whole presentation. So just FYI in there. So we're looking now at page 2. So here are some strategies that specifically work for everybody, but there's strategies I've pulled out that can specifically benefit female negotiators. All right, so let's go through these one by one, make whatever notes you need to. First things first, like I mentioned before, reframing the event. It's a conversation, it's not a negotiation. Women, like I said, I don't know, whatever it is, I think we know, and research tells us that we tend to be better at relationship building, reading the other party, reading that emotional content. We are good at conversations for the most part. Sadly, well, we've been trained, or we've been taught that more specifically, that skill since we're small, different than boys. Hopefully that's changing too, but we do have these conversation skills. So think of it as a conversation. That's all it is. It's a conversation, a dialogue. Something else that we know would work is to use an we approach. I want this thing, but it benefits we, so that we can do this, so the organization can do that. So I'd like to work at home, and I'd like to work at home because I will be able to contribute more to the team in terms of time and collaborative energy. I want to be able to pick up my child, or leave from work at 3 o'clock every Monday to pick up my child, so that I can bring my whole self to the team, and I can be more available, for collaboration, whatever it is. So when we say, yeah, I want this, but I want it to benefit the group. And again, men don't have to do that, but we find that women are more successful when we show that what we're asking for can benefit the group. I hope that makes sense what I'm saying. The group being the family, the committee, the work team, the organization itself, the neighborhood, whatever it happens to be. So we can still ask for what we want. I want this. Here's why I want it. So I'm hoping that makes sense. All right. I might need someone else to watch that chat for me. This is next one, really a big one. Be comfortable with discomfort. A big one being silence. So we have to start to learn to be comfortable with not necessarily harmonious feelings. So when I say I would like to be removed from this project and put on that project, here's my logic. We know that now maybe the emotional nature of the conversation is kind of getting a little bit heavier, heated. What women tend to do when we feel that emotional heat happening is we fill it with words. I don't mean it in a bad way, or so we start to use words to try to simmer down the emotional content, to try to neutralize it, thereby maybe backing off of the thing that we want. So we need to be uncomfortable that it might be a little hot in here, the emotional content, or we may have just said something that the other party isn't exactly receptive to, or surprised. Maybe they're surprised by it. We tend to fill those moments with our words. So I would suggest that to kind of handle that discomfort, just allow that silence to happen. So just kind of let it sit there. It's hard, but it's hugely effective. People around the world, Americans are not comfortable with silence, and when in worldwide negotiations, we know that they use silence as a tactic a lot to get Americans in general to agree to more. Women, we know, fill the silence as well. So just allow that silence to sit there once you put your opening bid out there. Fourth thing, women have a much broader network than men. We know that. So we know a lot of people with a lot of stuff. Use your network and start to be more deliberate about who you're including in your network and why. So make a note of who you got. Do you have someone that's got knowledge of employment law? Do you have somebody with knowledge of what's happening over there at XYZ company, or over there at the competition? Whatever it is. So be more deliberate about who you're putting in your network and use that network. We have to start, or we have to keep using it as women to help each other up, but use that network. Like I said a second ago, we know that men don't have, or their networks are different. They don't have those extensive networks that they can call on to the degree that women do. So this can be power for us and power for you as you're asking more for what you want. Don't underestimate the value of good preparation. Prepare. We often, this may be more personality based, but a lot of us tend to just jump into a negotiation, usually when we're upset about something. So, I come home and I see the house is a mess, and I'll right away, we got to figure out a way to make these chores more manageable. That's not the time to engage in that negotiation conversation. You haven't prepared. You don't know how you're going to approach that situation or that conversation. So winging a negotiation rarely works. So don't underestimate the power of preparation. This number 6, again, is so critical. Women we're getting better, but we don't do a terribly good job of asking for what we really want. A lot of us don't know what we want, or we think that what we want is the thing that's best for the family, that's best for the other party. So, where do we want to go on vacation? Well, where do you all want to go on vacation? So we have to be more what's the word? Determinant, or knowing, what do I want? I want to spend no more than 1 hour on chores every day. That's what I want. Whether it's realistic or not is not the issue. That's what I want. I want, in my job, I want to leave by 4 o'clock every day. That's what I want, based on my goals. That's what I want. Now, we have to figure out how to get there. So what women tend to do is they muddy what they want with the how do we get there. And they tell themselves they don't deserve it. So leaving at 4 o'clock every day, well, nobody else leaves at 4 o'clock every day, or I don't, or I really have to pay my dues, or I don't know. We come up with all kinds of excuses. We negotiate with ourselves, and then we end up not even asking for the thing that we really want. So I'm curious, how many of you have your own personal strategic plan? Like, here's where I want to be in 5 to 10 years. Excuse me. Here are the steps I need to get there. I need to get more education, or I need whatever. Here's the steps I need to get to what I want. Like, how many of you have a really good idea what you want? And I'm trying to make one in my head, but you should put it down on paper. Absolutely. Yeah. There's a lot of good stuff out there in making your own strategic plan, but how else are you going to know what to ask for if you don't have a plan? Like, I eat stuff around the house. I don't know if I don't know how much time I need to read or work out or whatever it is, how can I ask for it? And included in your strategic plan are things like exercise, learning. So along with a strategic plan, and I know a lot of your organizations have one, are your values. What do you value? So if you don't sit down to write down what are your 5 greatest values, well, then how can you ask for something that fulfills those? So we have to know. So, like, for me personally, learning, relationships, health, family, these are all things I value. So I make time for those, and that's where it comes to negotiation. What conversations do I have to get me those things that I want? So, yes, we have to have that knowing what we want in order to know what we want to ask for. Otherwise, we are dealing with others that tell us what we want. Oh, you don't really want that. Oh, you really should. Like when I was a mom, I am still a mom, but when my kids were little, you really should do this. And so I asked for a lot of things that wasn't for me. It was for an environment that other people thought I should have, but it wasn't satisfying to me. So asking for things that make sense to you, advance your goals, fulfill your values based on how you define it, not somebody else. You have to have a good idea of that. Otherwise it's going to be so hard to figure out what to ask for. So sorry if I'm getting preachy, but this is one I encounter in my coaching work a lot. Number 7, equalize the power gap. What we're talking about here is we often give other people more power than they have. So my boss, yeah, that's legitimate power, but I might know more than my boss does. So therefore, the power gap is sort of equalized. I might give a man more power than me. I might assume that by nature of gender that they know more than me. So doing an assessment of the power that you do have is an important strategy. We'll talk about that briefly in a sec. Number 8, hear no as not yet. What we mean by that is, well, just what it says. When you're told no, here it is not yet. So maybe it's no now, but maybe come at it from a different angle. Try it again. So hear no is not yet. Number 9, we know a success strategy for women and men as well is if you come at it with a plan. So I want to leave work every day at 4 o'clock. Here's the plan for how that's going to happen. So in the time between 4 and 5, I don't know what could happen. Phone calls that come in or whatever it is, here's a plan for how I'm gonna handle that. Maybe it's a transition plan. So what you're doing with your draft plan is you are taking whatever risks somebody has identified or whatever the cons that someone else has identified in your plan. It's basically your mitigation strategy. How am I gonna do that? So you can't take that job because who's going to do your job? Well, here's my plan for how that will happen. So having a plan already figured out is a good way to attack that. Celebrating and counting your small wins. So as you do start to ask, say, even though maybe I didn't get what the whole thing that I wanted, I got part of it. Good for me. I am moving forward. So count your small wins, celebrate those small wins. And on your step maybe to a higher level of accountability, authority, leadership, whatever. So there you go. So those are strategies. Keep them here. Try them. Work with them. Practice with them, and they will help. They will help for sure. All right, so we got about 20 minutes, and I'm going to talk about now the actual negotiation process, and then I'm curious to hear your questions. So before you enter into a negotiation, ask yourself these 2 questions. Is this negotiation worth it based on my short and long-term goals or deeply held values? So kind of what I was saying before. Is it worth it? Is it going to matter in 1 week, 1 month, 1 year? If the answer is yes, go for it. Ask. If it's not going to matter in 1 minute or 1 hour or 1 week, then probably it's not that important to you. So ask yourself, is it worth the time and energy right now? If the answer is yes, go for it. And if so, how am I going to approach that? So I do that kind of 1 minute. It's 10 minutes, 10 hours, 10 days, 10 months. As you get further out there, if yes, it's important, then come up with a plan and negotiate it. All right, preparing for negotiation. And notice all the stuff comes before the actual conversation. Makes the actual conversation that much easier. First thing, you want to zero in on your goal and identify what we call your interests. So what do I want from this negotiation? What am I interested in? What is the outcome I am interested in? I'm interested in an outcome where I'm only doing 1 hour's worth of chores a day. I'm interested in an outcome where I'm doing these types of tasks. I'm interested in an outcome where I'm leaving at 4 o'clock on Monday to go pick up my child. So zero in on what it is you want in your interests. This is different than, you may have already heard this, than your positions. My position is that my spouse is lazy and does not care about the house. So notice 2 different things here. My position is that work is imbalanced, that my coworker who doesn't know what's going on is making me do all the work. That's my position. That's my emotional position. So look at the difference. If I go into my boss and say, work is unbalanced around here. I do so much, my colleague doesn't do anything. Think about that versus, boss, I'm interested in discussing a way to allocate project work where I'm doing these types of tasks and fewer of these types of tasks, whatever that is. So listen to the difference when we're approaching something with interests versus positions, versus your emotional position. The sad thing is we've spent so much time on that emotional position, labeling, judging, that it's hard to step back and say, what am I truly interested in as an outcome from this conversation? Do some reconnaissance. So the second thing, got to do some digging. So what's important to the other party? So what does the boss want out of this? What's important to my spouse? What's important to my family? Whatever it is. What's been tried before? What options have worked elsewhere in the organization, elsewhere in the world? What are you willing to compromise on? What are you willing to give up? What are you willing to try? So we got to do this homework beforehand. Yeah, what's worked elsewhere? What might the other party be interested in? My spouse is probably interested in not working more than an hour on tasks at home as well. So then your third thing is you're gathering and preparing facts and data. So the degree that you can rely on facts and data is the degree that you're going to get a more favorable outcome in the negotiation. So how much time do you spend, for example, on tasks around the house? What are those tasks? What are alternatives that are out there? How much do they cost? You know, getting a house cleaning service or something. How much time does my colleague spend on this? How much time do I spend on it? Whatever. Get your facts, write it down. 12 hours a day, 3 hours a day, 4 hours on this, 5 hours on that. Write it down. You're going to get a lot less emotional in the conversation if you're dealing with facts that you've prepared beforehand. So do your research, prepare your facts. How else can you come up with a mutually agreeable, wise solution if you don't have your facts? How are you going to know it's wise if we don't have our facts and our data? And then that last point here, and I'm kind of boiling it down from what's in your handout. Cue up the conversation in a way that sets things up for success. And a way to do that is to refer to something you're both interested in. So boss, I'm interested in talking about something that will improve collaboration as well as my personal and our team's work-life balance. So you're presenting your interests in a way that references the other party's interests. Partner, I'm interested in coming up with a solution where I'm spending no more than an hour on home activities, and I imagine you'd like to spend maybe no more than an hour on home activities too. So I'd like to talk about something that we can both come to an agreement on. So that it's a great sales technique. They do that, you know, I can see you in that or whatever it is, but you're approaching this from a position of mutual interest. We are both interested in whatever this thing is, or here's some things that we're both interested in. I'm hoping that's making sense. I'm kind of going through this quickly, but so here's your preparation list. And I included in your materials, I included a checklist. So you can go through that checklist and be very, very thorough. It's a great guide. It's a great tool when you're approaching perhaps a more meaty negotiation or even a smaller one. Just a bit on power here. There's a lot of information on power, how you can get and use power. Remember that we're trying to leave the relationship stronger, so we're not abusing our power. Power that you might have, though, in a negotiation is if you, like, this is a silly example, but if you're trying to buy a car and you know that your neighbor can sell you their car for $10,000, lack of dependence. I don't really need the car salesperson to, you know, they can match my price or not because I already have that. So I don't need to depend on them really for anything because I already have that thing here. So that's power that you could leverage in a negotiation. Positional role or legitimate power. I mentioned this before, like my boss definitely has positional power. I, as in the role of coach, in whatever role, I have power, role of parent, I have power. So you could leverage that power if you have it. The last one, though, is one that we often underutilize, informational or expert power. So if you have information or if you know something that another party doesn't, that is power that you can leverage. So in a project or in a work setting, if you know more, if you've got certain skills that somebody else doesn't have, you can leverage those in a negotiation. You can say, hey, these skills are worth something. So I want to be compensated for it, or whatever the case may be. So that's power that you can use to your advantage in a negotiation. This is really nuanced, but I wanted to throw this out there that sometimes I think as women, we underestimate the power we have, and we give more, we give other people more power than they actually have. So when you go into a situation, list the power that you have. I have expert power. I have role power here. So don't give power where maybe the power really isn't. All right. Last thing we'll talk about here is this bargaining process. So you've done your homework. You've looked at those success strategies. You've determined that, yes, I want to have this negotiation conversation. In your participant guide, I go more in depth into this, but here are the steps that you'd follow when you go into this conversation. And again, you want to set the stage beforehand. You don't want to surprise somebody with this conversation because they're more likely to react emotionally. And we're trying to avoid emotional reactions. We're trying to stick with mutual interests and trying to stick to the facts. So always try to pave the way first, or give someone a heads up. I'd like to talk with you about this. When is a good time? When is a good place? And I'll iterate, we rarely succeed when we just kind of wing a negotiation or surprise another party. So first thing, you're opening that conversation in a way that builds trust, and you're focusing on interests, not positions. So I want to talk about how we can balance the chores at home in a way that I'm not doing any more than an hour's worth of work and you're not doing more than an hour's worth of work. Sound good to you? Sure, let's talk about it. Or I want to be compensated in a way that reflects my background, that reflects my experience. And I know that's important to you too. I want to work-life balance, boss. I know work-life balance is important to you. It's also important to me. I'd like to talk about how we can adjust my schedule for optimal work-life balance, but also optimal collaboration. Whatever. You hear in my words, I'm coming up, I'm not saying work is misallocated. I don't know, I'm trying to think of, I'm overworked and underpaid, I deserve more. That's my position. That's not going to get us very far. So this is something that takes good practice. And if you've got a buddy, I always tell people to get a negotiation buddy. And this is somebody that you can bounce these ideas off of, and you can check with them. What might my interests be here? What might the other party's interests be here? Next step in the conversation is just to clarify what the other party wants out of this and clarify the information you have. So my research tells me that I'm spending 4 hours a day on housework. How many hours are you spending each day? What are you doing? How long is that taking? Okay, so now we've got our facts. Or my research tells me that people in my position make between X and Y. What does your research tell you, boss? Or what is the range that has been used in the past? So number 2, often I'll go in with a list of questions, and sometimes I even share them with the other party beforehand. So just to make sure that we all have the same information. There's nothing worse than getting down a negotiation path and then finding out that other party has completely different information than you do. So maybe again, send those questions beforehand, or ask the other party, what information do you have? What's in the budget? Money wise, how much do we usually pay for this? How much, what's available to negotiate? Anything like that. Step 3, share your proposal, share your opening offer, drop your anchor if appropriate. So for example, if I'm asking for a raise, I can say, I would like somewhere between a $3,000 and $4,000 raise annually. That's called dropping your anchor. When you're putting it out there, be sure that when you drop an anchor, you can live with whatever is within that. Never, 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 never drop an anchor without first researching it. Never wing that, because that can never be taken back, and that is so much emotional weight. So never throw something out there unless you can live with whatever it is. But it certainly cuts to the chase. This is what my research tells me. So share your opening proposal, your opening offer, and now we generate alternatives. Often I will do these, it sounds silly, but I will start to do these on Post-it notes or on a whiteboard, write them down. So the more we can write down, it concretizes it, it makes it concrete. We understand what we're both dealing with. We might get less emotional because I can see it written up there. Okay, here's the different alternatives we're considering. And then you just start looking at each one and you balance it against the criteria. Well, one of our criteria was that you can leave to pick up my son at least one day a week, but this one's not going to allow me to do that on the third week of the month because of this. So that one's not as favorable as the other ones are, or whatever the case may be. If we were in person, we could do some more playing of the different criteria, but which of the alternatives best fit whatever wise looks like? So what is the wisest based on the facts at hand? And then come to agreement. Sometimes the option is apparent. Let's do that. Oftentimes it's a situation where let's try this thing for a little bit, and then let's try this other option for a little bit, and let's just see which one works best. I think often we believe that we need to walk away with one solid agreement, but we really can walk away with, let's try this for a while, let's try this for a while, or let's try this hybrid approach for a while and see how that works. At the very least, always make an appointment to come back and revisit that later. So during the course of this conversation, look at your calendars and say, we're going to come back in 6 months and we're going to talk about this to see how it's working. Never leave a negotiation without some kind of checkpoint in place to come back and see, how is this working? And if you need to, make notes on the things that you want to check on. So the things that you're not quite sure about, make some notes. So I want to check back on this and this, because I'm not convinced that the solution we've come up with is really going to solve this. So that's the particular thing that I want to watch for and I want to check for, and I want to revisit in 6 months. So write that agreement. Often I'll put it in an email, or if you want to make it more formal, go for it. I always do that with my kids when they were little. We would write down whatever the thing was and we'd have it on the whiteboard. So it just gives it more credence, more substance, and we're both more likely to abide by it if it's something that's written and we agree to. All right, a couple more slides here, and then I'm interested in your questions. So the strategies that I've just shared with you, using this I-we approach, looking at interests, not positions, asking the other party, or sharing that data, asking them for their information, etc. Honestly, that works in like 80% of situations. It does. If you maintain discipline, if you focus on the facts, don't let your emotions weigh in, so focusing on those facts. There are some outliers. If there's deep-seated interpersonal conflict, if people are abusing power or misusing power, that can cause this to not work. If there's gaps in a system or a process, perception problems, etc., those things can impact success, but they're only about 20%. So in my experience, what I'm talking about can work in 80% of the time. The thing is you have to maintain discipline when you're doing it and allow time for the process, for the negotiation conversation to happen. So if we try to rush it, we try to wing it, that's when we start to get into situations where this process is not going to work. And this should come as no surprise that if you are in one of those situations where the other party is abusing power, or they're misbehaving, they're not behaving professionally or as they should, here are some things that you can do to try to neutralize it. It's never, I think, a bad idea to take a step back or take a break. Just stop and come back to it later. Sometimes I will say, I'm feeling emotional, and if I continue, the conversation will not end in a way that is satisfying to both of us. So can we come back, or can we leave this conversation and come back so the conversation is more likely to end in a solution that we can both be happy with? So I'll use language like that. The outcome won't be as good as it could be if we just took a break and came back and attacked it. There are some really, really good resources out there. This book, The Confidence Code, I don't know if any of you have read that. I think it's 2014. There are some really, there's great research in there and some really good techniques in there as well. So that is one to get. Selena Rizvani's book, Pushback, is a good one too. Getting to Yes, that's an oldie but a goodie. That one's, if you are engaging in negotiations as part of your job, or you're negotiating with suppliers, something like that, Getting to Yes is a good book for that. And then the Women Don't Ask book is just a lot of good tips on some of the ones that I shared with you on asking, engaging in those negotiation conversations. So that's another one that over the years, I refer to quite a bit. Also, and this might be something that would interest you, leanin.org, Sheryl Sandberg's book, Lean In. Leanin.org has got a lot of really good references, good worksheets and things. So there's some really good videos in there, and they've got dialogue guides for circles. So you can start a women's circle, and it's got worksheets, things that you can do to work with a group of women to advance your skills in, strategic thinking, in negotiation, and in a number of different things. So some really good worksheets there. So I would highly encourage you, if you want more about this and you enjoy online learning, or you enjoy learning in this way, pop over to leanin.org. Some good stuff there. That's a lot. I boiled this down, or I made it shorter than what I had done before, and I still feel like there is a lot of information there. It is 6 o'clock, so I'm sticking around until 6:15. I know I just threw a bunch of stuff at you. So just to kind of go back from where we were at the beginning, looking at the elements of a negotiation, looking at those strategies for female negotiators, what questions do you have about those? So as you're thinking about employing some of these strategies for yourself, preparing for a negotiation, actually having that conversation, the bargaining conversation with somebody. I've got some other ideas. There's some examples on page 4 of the bargaining process. But as you're trying this on, what questions are coming up, or what are you hesitant about, or what gaps do you want filled in? And I'm fine if you want to unmute yourself and ask a question that way, or you can stick it down there in the chat. Oh, we have active circles. Oh, so like within this group you have circles? Because these would be, the stuff on leanin.org would be great for you. That would be awesome. And this would be a good topic too. Got it. Awesome. That's so great that you have each other that you can bounce ideas off of. Here's your negotiation buddies too, people in here.
I unmuted and stopped my video so other people would possibly feel comfortable doing the same.
Yeah.
Either way you want to ask questions, everybody, this is the perfect opportunity to not only thank Allison for her fabulous presentation, but also to get input, because it's hard. Like
Yeah.
listening to your presentation, Allison, I was like, the thing I have to do is not apologize. Like I enter every
No.
negotiation with an apology.
Yep. No. No, because you deserve it just like anybody else does. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, there's so many things I could say about that, but yeah,
We
it's
have a
true.
question from Alexa in chat. What resources do you suggest to find good salary ranges or other professional steps?
Um, I would pay, oh, Allison, what is it online? Drat. Glassdoor has got good information. Payrate.com. Darn it, hopefully it'll come to me. Glassdoor has got good information. I'm going to put it in chat. The Department of Labor publishes information. So onetonline.org. Own It Online. So ownitonline.org is the Department of Labor's website, and they take data from 3,200 companies, 9,000 jobs. They aggregate so that you can type in your job and it will tell you for Madison, the average pay range for that job is this. It has like intro, medium, and experienced. So it rates the level in that job, but they have average pay rates for that role in Madison. So you can at the very least use that. When you're negotiating a salary, you could always say a range. You can say these exact words: someone with my experience and knowledge, here is the range that is valued at. So someone with my experience and knowledge, the range that it's valued at is between $75,000 and $80,000 a year. Research tells us that. So there are your words. Research tells us that someone with my experience and knowledge, here's the range that job is valued at. So without apologies, because that's what it does. That's what research tells you. So look at Own It Online, look at Glassdoor. I think it's payrate.com, but Own It Online will be really, because it's Department of Labor. Okay, so how do you handle situations when an employer, recruiter, firm demands a specific number? I would ask them why. I would want to know a specific number. So I would be curious as to why that would be. But back to dropping your anchor, unless I wouldn't put a specific thing, I would turn it back to them. Well, given that range, what number would come up for you? And I would want to know why they'd come up with a number. Does that help?
Yeah, that's part of my question. But I've also come across a situation where there isn't actually a person to ask or respond to. It's
you're putting it in I hate that.
And they like literally won't accept anything except a number, and it won't accept $1.
Then make it the high end of, oh boy, that's such a hard one. I don't like those bots at all, because also they're asking you to identify your gender on a lot of those, which just gender and race, and that bothers me. Put the top of the range that you are willing to live with, and know that the number you're putting in there is probably, you are anchoring yourself with that number. So put a number in that you're willing to anchor with. Often there's a open field there, and you can say, my research tells me that this position would be, if your research tells you something different, potential firm, let me know. So I would put something in that too. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I know that's tricky.
Oh, there's a great question in the chat asking about how long should you wait to have the conversation again if your negotiation failed?
So is this for a salary? Oh,
It didn't specify. If you tried to have the conversation and it didn't go as planned, how long should you wait?
Definitely not at your next annual performance review. How would I do that? I might ask that other party. So if they say, no, we can't give you that promotion now, I might say, when would you be willing to talk about it again? What specific steps do I need to take? What do you need to see in me to be prepared to have that conversation again? So I might ask the other party, and if they say in a year, then you can possibly counter with, well, what specific things are you looking at? And if I'm able to get those specific experiences within 6 months, I'd like to revisit this conversation. Would that work for you? So that might be a way to do it. I would always set the seed for my future at the onset of my employment. So setting the stage to have those conversations so that they're not only annually. So when your boss says, gives you a hire or a new project, I would say, great. I'm assuming this project will then go to possibly help with my promotion later, or if there's more here that I have time for. But not your future growth should not just be annually. It should be something that you're talking about at least quarterly, and maybe anytime some growth assignment comes your way. And set that stage with your boss. What are you seeing in me? When do you want to talk about this again? Here's my plan. How does that mesh with your plan? Does that help the person that asked that
Allison?
question? Yeah.
Hey, Alex. So thank you so very much for all of this. Is incredibly important. There was a question that was framed a little earlier that I'd like to circle back to give
Sure.
more context to what you were just saying. Because their question was about how do you go about negotiations, whether that is understanding pay scale or these types of things when you're in a small company, a small private company, where that information is not going to be publicly available. You really can't compare that to a large, national or global organization. Even things as titles are very different within a small company, because you're a startup.
Yep.
Everybody's a scientist. Okay, great. That really does not help you down the line.
Yeah.
How can you apply some of these things to smaller organizations, and even to the point where you're discussing an annual performance review? Not a lot of the smaller companies do that.
Yeah.
They work so differently.
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. I would ask the person that's responsible for my promotion, my salary, my boss, my manager, to share with me how they value my work. So how are you pricing, or what things are you looking at when you're looking at compensation? What range are you considering? How do you value my experience when you're pricing that? What does that look like? Somebody at your organization is doing pricing. Somebody is pricing, they're looking at what you're doing and they're putting a price to it. You have a right to ask them, what are you pricing? What aspects of my job are you pricing, and how are you pricing those things? So the project management piece, maybe it's the decision-making piece, maybe it's the strategic thinking piece of it. But somebody is pricing that work. And if they can't answer how they're pricing that work, that should be a red flag for you, because then they're kind of pricing it based on what that other party is telling them. So if I come in and say, I'm worth 100,000, they say, okay, we're going to pay you 100,000. Somebody else comes in and says, I'm worth 80,000. Okay, we'll pay you 80,000. That's not an environment. Does that make sense? Because then they've no basis of valuing the work that you're doing. So I would ask that party, how are you valuing? Yeah, my work and everybody else.
Makes sense. No.
Yeah, so tell me, as much as you can, how is all this work valued? And what range would you consider? So yeah, I would want to know that. And then ask, so then what skills, what can I learn to move that forward? So is this skill valued more than this? Or yeah, does that help? There's more to it if we had time. But yeah, and if there's no annual performance review, I would 100% make it. I would say to my boss, how am I doing? In what ways have I met your expectations? In what ways can I meet them more? On a scale of 1 to 10, where am I in 10 being the absolute best, 1 being the absolute worst? Where am I, and how can I move that number forward? That's a really easy way just to start the conversation. What things am I doing that makes me that number, and how can I move it even higher up? If you want to have that quantifiable data, or that quantifiable thing, and just keep referring back to that and say to your boss, I want to talk about this at least every quarter. I want to know where I am. I want to know what I could do. So make your own, be more self-directed. Here's what I want. This makes sense to me. Does that help? I hope it helps.
I think we have about 3 more minutes and we have 2 more
Okay.
questions within the chat. So I want to make sure that we get to them. Any suggestions on how to approach a negotiation when others find you innately threatening?
Oh, I would want to know.
I can understand that.
I would want to know why that is. And maybe, how do you know that? Maybe you don't really know that.
I've actually seen situations personally, and this is not my question,
Yeah.
but just because I can relate, I can address
It's,
possibly. When women are willing to put forth their ideas, sometimes environments see into the people within that environment see that as being hostile just because they're
Yeah.
not used to seeing women present their ideas.
Yep, I would say those mutual interests, looking at, I would love, so we both would love a way to get this project done on time, right? You know, we're both looking to do that. I would love to talk with you about ways we could do that. So not saying, I think we should just blah, blah, blah. So we both want this, right? We both are looking for this. I'd love to talk with you about a way we could do that. Sitting side by side is always a way to do that, and it's hard to do that virtually, obviously, instead of across. So sitting next to each other, looking at this thing that we both want is a way that we can do that less threatening. I would, but I guess part of me too is saying, so what? You know, if they're on the defensive, it means that they're feeling attacked. And if you are doing your best to not attack, and I don't know the situation, but I might say, you know, what about that is your problem to deal with? What about that is theirs? And I don't mean to be flippant, but if you have a way to move something forward and it needs to be moved forward and you have an idea and you've invited that party to participate and they are defensive, you know, if you've done what you can do, am I making sense? So we feel responsible for others' emotional reactions a lot as women. And I guess what I'm saying is if they're feeling defensive, maybe that's something they need to figure out why, as long as you're respectfully looking at mutual interest and trying to move something forward.
Great
So
point.
I am, okay.
There was one last question. Let me scroll up to it really quick. When asking for a promotion, what data can you compile, especially when you see the job requirements are vague and
Yep.
those in the role have different backgrounds?
You should always maintain your own journal of accomplishments. Always be making an accomplishments journal. Every week you should be able to put something in there. I solved this problem. I did diffuse this customer issue. Here's what I did. So the situation, what you did, and what the outcome was. So always be making an accomplishments journal. It helps to boost your confidence when you can look back at that and say, man, I rocked this past month. Look at all I did. It helps you prepare for the next job search because you've got all these examples you can cite. So always have that experience, always have the things that you, that can boost your power, your strength, and help to sell you. Now, I don't remember what the question was, why I got off on something. But does that help for that one?
Yeah, I think it definitely did.
Okay.
There's lots of positive comments so far. I invite everybody while we're signing off here to maybe type something in chat to thank Allison for her presentation.
Oh, you can just say thank you.
Or you can come on mute and say thank you. And just remind everyone to join the Slack channel. I think it'll be great to participate in that because we can ask questions that might make us uncomfortable on other platforms. And I think that's a really great opportunity. So we should really take advantage of it.
Feel free to email me too. I'm happy to answer questions there if I haven't gotten to them here.
Thank you again, Allison, and thank you everyone for attending.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Thank you.